I'm your host, Donna Cates, and each week we'll dive into powerful stories, expert strategies, and practical tools to help you take charge of your financial future. Whether you're planning for retirement, navigating a divorce, or simply looking to build your wealth with confidence, this is your space to grow, learn, and thrive. Let's get started with today's podcast. Hello, everyone. I'm super excited today to introduce you to Niel, who is a Thrive post divorce coach with A Niel International. And I can't tell you how eager I am to dive deep into your career path and learn a little bit more about why you're doing what you're doing. So, can you give us about a minute and a half overview of what you're doing and why you got into it, Alex?
Sure. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. This is so exciting. So like like Donna said, the I am a Thrive After Divorce coach, and I basically help single women, newly single women, coming out either of a divorce or a breakup after a long-term relationship to really rediscover who they are, so that they can create a life of, that makes them feel alive, that makes them feel like they're thriving, that is fulfilling. Because what I found out after I went through my journey was that I came out of my divorce and I had no idea who I was and I had no idea what I wanted because I had given so much to my former husband, invested in the relationship, in the business, and all of these things that somewhere in there I got lost. And I didn't know, like I said, when I came out, well, who do I want to be from here forward? Because I'm not the same person I was coming into the marriage, but I don't really know just yet who I want to become. So that was in a way, the gift that came from the divorce was, having the opportunity to go in and say, okay, I get to design this how I want it. How am I going to do that? And because I went on this journey, I have now been with a man for the past 12 years. It's unlike anything that I've ever experienced. And I wouldn't have that if I hadn't gone through my experience. So I want women to know that they don't have to do it alone. They can do it, but how quickly do they really want to come to the other side and invite that into their lives?
Whew, that's a whole lot to unpack
It,
here. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions.
okay.
What was the length of your first marriage?
I was married for 10 years.
For 10 years. Okay. So, and I do a lot of divorce work and offer a divorce workshop. And I will
Okay.
tell you that I've had people that have been married as few as 2 years, as
Mhm.
many as 50 come to me in the process of divorcing. And when you were talking, Alex, about, kind of losing yourself, I
Mhm.
think it's the nature of the beast. I mean, number one, as a woman, don't you find, I mean, we're taking care of everybody else and we kind of sacrifice and put ourselves at the back. It's just the way we're built. But even if we weren't, I think we do lose our own identity in a lot of situations, especially if it's not a good marriage. Would you
Yeah.
agree with that?
I agree with that. And I think in addition, it's also our role models, right? When we look at our moms have dedicated their lives to their husbands, to their families, to giving and not really taking the time to do for themselves. So it's societal, but it's also within our own families. It's what we've seen is the right way to be in a marriage.
And even it might not even be the right way. It's the way that it's the only thing we know. It's
Yeah.
what we learned,
Yeah.
right? So, and another thing that you said that I think is important is the fact that, most of us, when we are coming out of a marriage, we're so enthralled in all the emotional stuff
Mm,
that a lot of times we don't see that we're being given, and I'm going to use your words, a gift
yeah.
of the opportunity to recreate the life that we want for ourselves. So talk to me a little bit about that in the work that you do and how you help people come to realize that they do have this opportunity when they're coming out of a negative situation.
Yeah, I think the big thing first is before we can even get there is we have to grieve, right? We have to give ourselves the time to digest, to be angry, to be frustrated, to go through all of the emotions. And there comes a time when we have to make a decision. Do I want to live in that past that will never be, or do I want to, you know what, it's my life. I get to live it. And for the first time, I can live it on my own terms. And then what is it going to take for you to be able to actually do that? Right. So it starts with learning more about who we are, learning more about ourselves, learning to love ourselves so that we're not dependent on somebody else's love to make us happy. We have to do that within ourselves first. And then once we learn to do that, we become much less like we can stand on our own 2 feet, and we then invite a different kind of relationship into our life than if we're approaching it from a place of almost like from a place of scarcity.
Right. And I had a conversation with somebody earlier today where we were talking about um, thinking the glass is half empty
Mm,
versus the glass is half full. Same thing. It's kind of what we're thinking about, we bring about, right?
yeah.
So you've got to get in the right mindset. And for me, coming out of my divorce years ago, I can say that now I'm 30 years married. So the second
Mhm.
go around was successful, but the first go around coming out of it, I literally was just kind of like left deer in the headlights. Oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? All the self sabotage and codependency. So I had to
Mhm.
learn a lot about the role that I played in my divorce, or bad marriage, whatever you want to call it, whatever point you step into it.
Yeah,
Yeah, but the thing being is that there is work that needs to be done, and if you're willing to invest in yourself and do that work, now we can create
absolutely.
that life. So
Uh,
that's
yeah.
awesome. I'm real curious to know because you hear a lot of people, and even in different professions, calling themselves a coach today.
Mm.
So tell me, what do you see as the biggest problem in your industry right now, and what are you doing to try to solve that?
So I think that especially in the context of divorce, I see that there are a lot of people that are helping women and men through through their divorce. You have divorce recovery coaches, which is similar to what I do, but I find that divorce recovery is a bit more passive, and I like to be more active and more taking kind of taking ownership. And so and then you have traditional counseling, right, which is really going to focus more on past pain, but really the idea that it's first of all not so many people focus on post divorce, um, but then it's not a one size fits all kind of situation, right? Um, and I think there's a lot in coaching where the client drives the process, but I feel there's more power when we as coaches drive the process because we have most of us have a system that works.
Hmm.
We've battle tested it. We've taken a number of clients through it. And when it's a question, when it's more the the client driving the process, it feels more like an accountability kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here, um, it's more about, okay, what are the outcomes that we want to achieve? And then this is the process that we take them through. So it's really um, helping them because when you come out of a divorce and you don't know really like where do I go from here, it's difficult for you to kind of quote unquote dictate the process, right? You need to have somebody who's going to take you on and help you and guide you and keep you focused on the future instead of instead of focusing too much on the past.
Yes, and I agree with you too, Alex. I think one of the important things that you just shared is the fact that we're it we're not the experts when we're coming, and not you and
Hmm.
I. If someone's coming to you for coaching work, we've likely only been through one divorce.
Hmm.
Where you and I, with the work that we do, we've been through hundreds of them.
Yeah.
So that's when you said tried and true, and it's been battle tested.
Yeah.
I think that's the advantage. So and sometimes we have to help people understand that we do have that experience that they
Hmm.
don't have, and that's just our job at educating them on how we can help them. I think that's important. So
And
Tim, I know you said that you're not cookie cutter. That's a really important thing because
yeah.
everybody's got their own circumstances. But tell me what makes you unique in the way that you're working with women.
So I work from a predefined curriculum. So I know right from the beginning, I know what the process is. I know the system. I know so we'll talk about a bunch of different things. Like we'll talk about clarity. We'll talk about courage. We can talk about um, uh, productivity in the sense of, okay, I need to arrange my life in a different way now because my life looks different. How do I go about doing that? So being able to take women through that process of, okay, let's start with clarity, right? So we take it one step at a time, each session building on the next one, or on, I should say, on the previous one. Um, and really, again, being focused on what is always the next best action for me. If I know this is where I want to go, what is the next step? So we don't go about it kind of willy-nilly. It's like, okay, we're going to follow the process. And I find that to be much more effective than just asking random question. It doesn't mean that when an emergency comes up, that there's something that they really need to talk about. We put it on the table, we talk about it, we discuss it. But then we go back into, okay, the flow of the curriculum and of the process.
And I love having the process because it keeps you focused and
Hmm.
focused on the forward, not the looking in the rear
Yeah.
view mirror. And you've got those one-off conversations that you're going to have. That's because we're human, right? So we're going to
Absolutely.
have our emotions that pop up that we have to deal with, but having that strategy in place. And another thing is you're taking baby steps. You're
Yeah.
not trying to solve everything in one session. And I think, helping women understand it's not all going to be done at one time. It's
Hmm.
a process. So
It is.
that's awesome. Great. So tell me, where do you see your industry, the coaching industry, going over the next 5 to 10 years? And how are you staying on top of that?
So I think the biggest thing, and it's not just, I would say, not just even coaching,
Hmm.
um, but I think the need for community, right, is increasing. I think one of the disservices, one of the great things about social media is that we can connect with more people all the time in a lot of different places with people that we would never otherwise have come across. So we feel like we're more connected, but we're also more isolated.
Hmm.
And so the need to build more community. And when you think about women coming out of a divorce, sometimes, often, they come out of a divorce and they lose their whole support system. They lose their family, not just their adopted family, but they lose their family, they lose their friends. And all of a sudden, they find themselves without a community that they can rely on. So being able to make that community available to them through group coaching, for example, because the other thing is we always feel like we're like the only ones going through this,
Hmm.
right? Or, well, I've had it, our story is always worse than everybody else's story. And then when you bring people together and you start to talk about it in the context of a community and within a group, you realize you're not alone. You realize that um, other people. have had it worse, but other people have come out of it better or are coming out of it better. So it allows you to connect with people on different levels and see that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that if somebody else has done it, I can do it too, right? So being able to um, build that sense of community and that sense of support, whether it be through group coaching, through Facebook groups, whatever the local events and online events, just bringing people together so they know that they're not alone. I think that connection, that connectivity, um, is really going to be a game changer.
I couldn't agree with you more. And as you were talking about the communities that we lose, when we do divorce, it literally it's like everything's split in half, and even
Yeah.
people are losing their whether it's a church or synagogue, their religious communities, and or, they're established ones. They may still have
Hmm.
one, but they're going to have to go somewhere else to recreate that. So it's everything.
Yeah.
Kids and grandparents and all the things, right? Now, do you work with children at all, or are we literally not involving any like co-parenting or anything, right?
I don't.
Okay, I was just curious about that because that's a trend I'm seeing is a lot more coaching or at least counseling, I think, for co-parenting.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I don't have children, so I could only speak about it from the perspective of what I experienced when my parents divorced,
Hmm.
but that was, 40 years ago. So I don't know how relevant it would be in the complexity of today's day and age.
Got it. Awesome. So tell me, I'm going to make this a little personal. It doesn't have to
Okay.
be, but what's the biggest challenge that you faced to this point in your life, whether it's professional or personal, either's fine. And how has that shaped the way you're doing business today?
So I would say the biggest challenge was l- growing my business after 30 years in corporate, because it takes a different mindset. It's, much more autonomous. I remember when the day after I left my corporate gig, I stood in my living room and I was like, okay, now what? Because my calendar had always been dictated by my clients, by my bosses, by my colleagues. And all of a sudden, I'm master of my own destiny.
Hmm.
And when I first started coaching, I was actually coaching high performance women, right? High performing women, high achieving women. And because I didn't want to talk about my divorce story, because it's one thing for us to talk about, oh, you're divorced, I'm divorced, but to splatter it all out there on social media and to use it
Right.
to share it that way was not something I was willing to do. And I found that my business was struggling because I couldn't show up as authentically as I can now. Because it was like my life was a train ride, and talking about high performance coaching or talking about high performance was like taking the train halfway through the journey. Because what got me here was my divorce. And so I ended up for a couple of years really struggling with, making this business work. And it wasn't until I was like, this is my story. This is who I am. Does it feel really uncomfortable putting it out there? For it's like waving a flag and saying, "Hey, failure over here," But but it wasn't until I owned that I started to see things change, and I started to see the tide turn. So really being able to step into, like I do with my clients, step into your authentic self, rediscover your authentic self. Um, Really, that was the challenge, you know, that transition from corporate and then working on a business that wasn't fully aligned with who I was, and then finally, stepping into and owning what I do, that changed the whole thing.
I love everything that you just shared, and it's I appreciate your authenticity, especially. But being there, going from that corporate world and all the structure to
Mm,
now it's just you, and you're going, okay, now what do I do? I mean, the world's your oyster, but where do I start? That kind of
yeah.
overwhelm, and then almost I get a sense of maybe a touch of imposter syndrome with the you coaching high performance people, and you're over here going.
Yeah.
You're just right. So I can totally relate to all of that. So and I know that the audience will appreciate that as well. So you were doing the high coaching. Well, let me ask you this question: before you left corporate, were you doing corporate coaching for women then as well, or totally different?
No, I wasn't. I spent 30 years in the fragrance industry, and I spent 20 of those years, 25 of those years in mostly in sales and marketing. So I was doing nothing. I just went down the coaching rabbit hole when I went through my own journey of,
Mhm.
okay, where do I go from here? So that's when I discovered personal development, and I read and read and read and read and attended seminars. And so that's kind of what shaped me into who I am today.
Mhm. That is so fabulous. And I have to share with you that, I've been doing the work that I do with women divorcing and just women in managing women's investments for 25 years. And over the course of 15 of those years, when I've been doing my divorce workshop, I've had 4 women who've attended my divorce workshop where they were thinking about or in the middle of divorce
Mhm.
who ended up going back to school to get their counseling degrees. So they
Wow.
literally became counselors. So much like you learning about this coaching,
Yeah.
venue. Yeah, here's a path we can take. So, but 4, that's a pretty significant number. So, yeah,
Yeah.
but we create that through our life experience. We see the need and we have a desire to fill it. So I think
Mm,
that's awesome.
yeah.
Cool. All right. Now, another personal question. If you could have lunch with anybody, living or deceased, who would that be and why?
So I would say my mom.
Okay.
Um, so we moved to America in 1985,
Okay.
and my parents divorced, I think, in 91, something like that. And I was 15 when we arrived, so I was 21 or so when they divorced. And she went home. She went back to France. So for years, we would see each other at Christmas time, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time. And recently, about 2.5 years ago, she was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer.
Mm.
So thankfully, I dropped everything I was doing here and I went home and I spent almost 6 months with her. Just, we didn't do really anything. I would take her to the doctor's office, I would take her to her hospital appointments. But I feel like it was such in amongst all the negative sides of her getting cancer, just the opportunity that I had to spend that time with her, because I feel like almost like I was robbed of this time with her because she never lived next door,
Mm.
right? And so being able to spend any amount of time with my mother, who is just a pill, I love her to death, and being able to catch up on those years in a way that we missed, she will always be my first pick.
That is awesome. Is she still living?
Yes, she is.
Okay, fabulous. That is so awesome. I'm so excited to hear that. And I have a parallel story to share with you
Okay.
as well. But tell me if people are interested in working with you and taking advantage of your expertise in this coaching niche, tell me how can they best reach out to you, connect with you?
So they can find me on LinkedIn under my name, Alexandra Niel, or they can just go check out my website, alexandraneal.com. I've got some free resources on there. I've got some information, a bunch of blog articles, and they'll see like I have my old coaching life in there as well, but I've got a lot of new um, information and resources really more supporting women coming out of their divorce. So that's really the best way. And right from there, they can, book a call or whatever they want to do with me. So
That's
it's a
awesome.
great place to go.
Yes, and I encourage everybody to go visit. And I think I'm already following you on LinkedIn now, so we're connected
Yes.
there. So
Yes.
excited for that, and we'll definitely help support your practice as you continue to grow.
Thank you.
So thank you so
Thank you.
much for being a guest today. It was a lovely conversation.
Oh, Donna, thank you so much for having me. This was
I
fun.
hope today's conversation left you feeling inspired, informed, and ready to take the next step in your financial journey. Remember, building wealth isn't just about money, it's also about creating a life that aligns with your goals and values. If you found this episode valuable, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with the women in your life who deserve financial empowerment too. Until next time, stay confident, stay empowered, and keep building the life you desire.